Order. Mary Ellen, can notice?
Yes. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the June 21st, 2018 Commission meeting was mailed June 19th, 2018 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who had requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office video conference locations and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested.
Sam Broughton?
Okay, join me in contemplation here. Let us demonstrate our thankfulness for all we share by exercising reason and compassion in our decisions and actions, by respecting the rights and needs of those who we serve and with whom we work, by supporting our consumers and their families in their areas of need, by committing ourselves to best practices, fairness, equity, and effective services. Let's join together this morning to accomplish these things. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Could we do the introduction of the guest? Do you want to start?
I'm Patricia Harrison. I'm an advocate.
That order?
Joan Cooper, Director of Engineering Implement. Reverend Heather McPherson, Richland County.
Heather Waddell, Tri-Development Center.
Good morning, Kathleen Roberts, Witness our Parents Club in South Carolina, PAD, and Heritage, 2 deceased children that were served at Witness Center for 31 years.
Angela Rodriguez, South Carolina Spinal Cord Injury Association.
Ray Miller, DD Council.
Alfredia Stevenson, Chester Lancaster Board.
Jennifer Bentley, Lieutenant Governor's Office on Aging.
Good morning, Mike Keith, Mary Ann Dillon, DSN.
Pike Moss, Calhoun County Disabilities and Special Needs Board.
Dorothy Goodman, in the absence.
Chuck Norman, DDSN.
Kathleen Lent, Aging with Claire.
Services here at DDSN.
Thorvald Simmons, Protection and
Susan John Morgan, DDSN.
Jerry Mizel, DSN.
Board of Governors.
Ronald Courtney, Tri-Development Center, and Disabilities.
Margie Williamson, Arthur, South Carolina. Susan Davis, Center for Disability Resources. Elizabeth Zig, DDSN.
Dexter Alston, DDSN.
Good morning, Andy Kobe, DDSN.
Thank you very much and welcome. Okay, can I have the adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Minutes of the May 17th, 2018 Commission. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This morning we do not have any public input.
Eva, I signed up. I signed up too.
Okay. I didn't get it, I'm sorry. Go ahead. And I did not see you up behind that podium. I'm sorry. I looked for you. Thank you.
Thank you. The Commission will be selecting a new state director who will affect the lives of thousands of individuals with disabilities and their families. I hope the Commission will hire a director with the academic qualifications and extensive experience operating Medicaid-funded programs needed to serve and advocate for adults and children with disabilities and their families. I hope the new state director will bring new ideas about how to comply with CMS final rule, understand the needs of consumers and families, allow providers to directly bill Medicaid, and lead the agency in direction to comply with the legislature's intent to support families and provide services in the least restrictive setting. In recent years, DDSN has too often ignored the clear intent of the General Assembly in its enabling legislation, the Adult Health Care Consent Act, the Rights of Clients with Intellectual Disabilities, DDSN Family Support Act, and the State Administrative Procedures Act, all of which require DDSN to support families, to provide services in the least restrictive setting, and to make rules through the public process of promulgating regulations. The result is that families now feel compelled to obtain legal guardianship just to assist in making health care and service decisions with their loved ones, or even to be their adult child unable to consent has been sexually assaulted in a DDSN program. The whole purpose of the Adult Health Care Consent Act was to prevent families from having to obtain legal guardianship to make health care decisions for their family member unable to consent. Instead, without promulgating regulations, DDSN staff sought to have adult health care changed to give DDSN priority over families in making health care decisions for those unable to consent. Current leadership has interpreted the Adult Health Care Consent Act to give agency legal authority over parents who have not obtained guardianship to make decisions for their adult children who are unable to consent. DDSN officials recently proposed directive revisions that would further erode the rights of families. The chairpersons of the Commission and the Commission Policy Committee are to be commended for delaying the approval of these directives until the Commission reviews and receives additional public input, and for proposing that all directives be reviewed by the Policy Committee. One commissioner at the policy meeting, Ms. Unum, last week asked why DDSN is operating its programs pursuant to these directives instead of promulgating regulations as required by the State Administrative Procedures Act. Section 4420-220 clearly requires DDSN to promulgate regulations for the operation of its programs. Section 4426-180 provides that DDSN shall promulgate regulations to obtain informed consent and to protect the dignity of the individual. PNA filed a lawsuit against DDSN in 2007 asking DDSN to do just that, but instead of simply complying with the request of PNA to comply with state law and to administer its programs through the public process of promulgating regulations, DDSN has paid private providers for more than a decade fighting this lawsuit, which was filed in 2007. Supreme Court denied DDSN's request to review the Court of Appeals decision remanding the case for trial. Commissioners need to ask how much money has been spent fighting this lawsuit for more than a decade instead of simply complying with the law requiring the agency to promulgate regulations. A hearing will be held in this case in Richland County Circuit Court on Monday, June 25th. I hope that the Commission will instruct its lawyers to stop their obstruction efforts and agree to comply with the Administrative Procedures Act by promulgating regulations instead of wasting more tax dollars fighting this case. Today, you will be asked to vote on community provider contracts. For the first time last year, the Commission was provided a detailed breakdown of the community provider contracts. Commissioners should ask why DDSN is choosing winners and losers by arbitrarily paying ongoing capital debts for certain chosen providers. For example, for 10 years, DDSN is paying nearly $100,000 in mortgage expenses for Chesco out of funds allocated by the General Assembly to provide services not brick and mortar, which its competitors must pay out of band payments. DDSN currently holds more than $13 million in capital improvement funds. Before approving the proposed contracts, the Commission should ask why over $327,000 is being proposed in these contracts to pay mortgages and or leases, thereby losing the 70% federal matching dollars. If the Commission determines that payments of these expenses is legal and equitable, then it should be paid from capital improvement funds so that the state funds proposed for these purposes would result in more than $1.4 million available to provide services for people with disabilities and their families. Commissioners should also consider the impact these payments have on competition. I hope that each of you has carefully studied the differences between the band payments paid to DDSN providers. For example, the Band H payment for the majority of DDSN providers is $86,755. Why is the Pickens County DSN Board contract for individuals assigned to Band H the highest average in the state of $98,610, or close to $12,000 more per person for the 41 individuals served by that board? Under the band system, there is no requirement that funds paid to providers be used for the intended purpose. When a consumer in Pickens was slapped by a house manager, the board attempted to justify the abuse by explaining that staff was under a lot of stress because the agency was 31 staff short. Did that board divert funds paid through the band system for services to help pay for a dormitory to be built on property owned by a private religious college in violation of the state's constitution, prohibiting state funds from being used for such purposes? When I analyzed the private residential provider contracts, I noted that the highest average per person contract in CTH2s with outliers was at UCP at $152,730 and Community Options at $139,791. The average per person contract amount for 11 individuals served at SLPs at Community Options was over $5,000 higher than other private providers providing these services. It was reported in an article that the Community Options contract under the former state director's tenure who accepted employment with this provider was increased 66% last fiscal year. The commission is being asked to approve increases to that private provider's contract by nearly 15% with 6 fewer people being served. Given our growing waiting list and increase in aging caregivers, I also question why the funding for caregiver relief is being reduced nearly $250,000, resulting in the number of individuals to be served to be reduced almost in half. I also question why HASKI support services appear to be being reduced and average close to $1,500 per person, while intake is being increased 82% or nearly $170,000. I would encourage you to ask about these proposed community contracts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Kathleen? Kathleen Roberts?
I'm gonna just sit this because I want to talk a little bit about those in a minute, but, I really want to report too also on Witten Center and its progress in the last few months, and because I think it's important that you know how important these centers are to us and to the folks that they serve there. You know, we have 5 centers. At Witten Center, we finished our golf tournament this past April and we raised over $8,500.
Wow.
We have a beautiful tram and tug that we use on campus, and it was in dire need of repairs, and it was going to cost us over $15,000. But this is just like a antique tram, and the kids love it. One's a wheelchair and one is for seating. So we took this money and applied money that had been donated through the Parents Club at Witten Center and had this repaired to a local company in Newberry that I go to church with. So I knew they were reputable, and they're excellent all over the world. They're red line machinists. But anyway, so we were happy that that money was provided for that. All funds that come through the Witten Center Parents Club are used specifically to enhance the lives of the children at Witten Center, and we're thankful for that. The Witten Center Foundation and the Witten Center Parents Club are sending 3 athletes to Washington State for Special Olympics, and 4 staff. And it's very expensive, but we feel it's just so important that these children experience something that they'll never experience again. Many of them haven't flown on a plane, so they're excited, and we're excited for them. We also, in Newberry County, they do a fishing program every year, and the participants from Witten Center go and fish all day and have snacks and lunch, and it's also very special. July 4th, we always do a parade at Witten Center. This year, it will not be on July 4th, but it will be on June the 29th, and we have cars and floats and consumers that ride on the floats and in the cars and automobiles, and they thoroughly enjoy that. So we're always working, and then they take our individuals in the community. We have Clinton on Main, I think it's called, and great bands come in and the consumers get to go do that. So we are not hiding them away in a facility. They get out a lot and do a lot. They go to parades and zoos. The Parents Club provides monies for the staff to go along with the individuals to lots of outings. We just feel like it's very important that those individuals get out. So anyway, that's just a few things. We'll have an end of the summer bash on August the 31st, and we will have a fun day for the July 4th, and fashion show is tomorrow. The recreation staff are helping residents and staff have a fashion show, so we're looking forward to that tomorrow too. So anyway, that's just a few things. Now, real quickly, I brought these flowers out of my garden. I purchased these bulbs many years ago, and I have thoroughly enjoyed having them and sharing them with a lot of people. And just like these bulbs, they have to be nurtured. They have to be cared for, watered. They have to be planted 6 inches deep, each bulb. And as the years progress, they divide and multiply. And as they do, they rise to the surface. And as they rise to the surface, they have to be removed and replanted somewhere else. And I kind of liken these flowers to the individuals that we serve. They're each unique. You see there's 2 different colors. Normally I wouldn't mix those colors together, but because we serve a variety of people, I mix them together today to to show you that we serve a lot of people, and DDSN has done a terrific job of trying to serve as many folks as they possibly can in different stages of their lives. And so we usually start at home, and then we work our way up to a community residence, and then we work our way up if needs be, because they need more help, they need more love and condition, they go into a regional center. And so I want to make a point today that as we choose a new state director, that we remember that state director needs to have compassion for everyone, and that every individual is unique, just like each one of these flowers. Some of them were bent over. I was cutting them in 104 degrees yesterday morning, and I didn't plan on doing this today, but I wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and say, this needs to be heard. And so I want you to know that we love the fact that we can serve people in the home and in the community, but we also love the fact that we have these centers. And I have watched these centers decrease, which I guess is a good thing, but also I have seen individuals come in the last few months, especially those with autism, that are very, very hard in some points to handle, and medically fragile children like mine were, that need that 24-hour care on a campus. And people say, no, they can do that in the home. No, you can't do that in the home. Parents need people that are on board in a center. You have 3 or 4 staff in a building, and we always know that there's going to be somebody there watching and caring for those individuals. So as we compare flowers with our children, let's remember that each of them are individual and unique, and each of them need to be nourished. And I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Somebody gets the prize, and I think we're going to give that to the director at this point, and you can share them out.
Okay.
Okay, can I have commissioner's update? Anybody?
Today's Eva Ravenel's birthday.
All day without
Happy birthday.
I just love spending it with you too. It's been great. Could you show that picture on the, I have one thing. I, last month, I had a really nice time. I went up to Oconee County. I tried to surprise Jerry, at his center, but someone told on me, said that I was coming, and had a great time. I was thrilled to see all that they're doing there, and he took me around and showed me a few of their houses. And I just want to show one thing. He took some pictures of me because I was hoping I was going to be in the pictures. I got my camera back, not one picture of me, but there is a cute picture of him. And they are selling, it's ices.
It's shaved ice.
Shaved ice. And hopefully he's going to show us one picture of it. I did send it.
Yeah, I see it on the screen.
Oh,
Getting there.
getting there?
Oh, there.
There you go. But I really appreciate it. So when I travel around the state, I always love to go visit different programs. And so he was so nice that he took the time to, and I'm so impressed what I loved and had no idea. In all the houses, everybody have either double or queen size beds. So it was great to see. Thank you very much. And after that, I have sadness. Mary Ellen Barnwell, this is her last meeting, and so I'm so sad that she's going to go, but we have enjoyed having her. And I want to read this. Whereas Mary Ellen Barnwell of Eastover was appointed by Nikki R. Haley, Governor of South Carolina, in June 2015 to the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs, and has served from June 15th, 2015 to June 2018, representing the 6th Congressional District. And whereas she was elected by her peers as the Secretary of the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs in June 2017, and demonstrated both exceptional statesmanship and stewardships. And whereas throughout her years of service on the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs, she has continually demonstrated exceptional leadership and dedication to the people with disability. And whereas her contributions as commissioners reflect her commitment and advocacy to increasing opportunities for people with disabilities in self-advocacy, education, employment, and community participation. And Whereas her dedicated efforts have contributed significantly to the improvement and expansion of services for people with intellectual and related disabilities, autism, traumatic brain injury, and spinal cord injuries, and to the increased opportunities in the community and the workplace. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs and its department express our deep appreciation to Mary Ellen Barnwell for her outstanding contributions and wish her continued success in all her future undertakings. With respect and admiration for a valued colleague and outstanding public servant of South Carolina, we do hereby attest with our signatures. Thank you very much, and we're going to miss you.
It was an honor to be asked, and it was an honor to serve. I'm not good with honor. I may have had a quieter presence on the board, but I'm a big kid. And I firmly stand by the decisions that we all made collectively as a group. I'm very pleased with the direction that the commission is going, and I'm excited for the department with the pending selection of a new director. If you need me for any reason, the office will have my personal contact information, so please reach out to me. I live in Eastover on a beautiful small farm, and we'd love for you to come visit us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Vicki Thompson's going to speak on the policy committee with update. All right.
Only chair in every committee there. Let me look here.
Policy committee.
Okay, the policy committee, are we in a tab here with this one?
We have to make a motion.
So the policy committee met last Friday and made a significant change that will lead to a shift in how we create administrative directives and who approves administrative directives. So it was a good meeting with some healthy discussion and debate, and so Lori Unum and I and
Sam.
Yeah,
He was
he
by
corrected a couple things. And I think
I
Eva was
listened
on
in.
there. Yeah, everybody was on there but Gary, so I don't think we have to, debate too much because that would have come out, and Chris was on there. So basically, we determined that we would add the administrative directives, that we would add input from not just agency staff, but providers, consumers with disabilities and their families, concerned advocates, and the general public. That the committee would serve in that function and would receive that input. And we referenced the authority from section 442220 of the code, which gives the commission the authority to determine the policy and promulgate regulations governing the operations of the department. And we removed the Carver governance model, and the meat of the change is the policy committee reviews suggestions for new and proposed changes to agency policies, directives, and standards. The policy committee will take into consideration all comments submitted through the DDSN website and or submitted to the committee by other means prior to making recommendations to the commission. And the policy committee will take into consideration recommendations and input from staff. And again, we added providers, consumers, their families, advocates, and the general public. So those are the major changes. And there is one provision that the state director has authority to operate in case of emergency without following these guidelines. Basically, that's what it says, giving them time-sensitive decision-making power. So is there any other comment from anybody that was there, Sam? No? Lori? Lori, are you on there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No comment beyond, Deborah raised in her remarks this morning that I had some issues about the lack of regulations. I was not aware that there was litigation pending on that issue right now, so I don't think I have any further comment on it at this time.
Okay, thank you. So that is our recommendation is to change the guidelines with those changes as outlined. Pat, do you have anything to add to any of that?
No, you pretty well covered it. I saw unanimity among everybody present, and
Okay.
I think it's a great idea.
So the motion from the policy committee is that we recommend that the guidelines be amended as presented.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Okay. The nominating committee. Vicki, it looks like you're on tap.
Okay, nominating committee, the proposed slate of officers for 2018-2019 is Eva Revenell, chairman, Gary Lamel, vice chairman, Vicki Thompson, secretary. And I see ballots here. Do we need to do this, or how does that work?
Only if there's.
Only if you,
Yeah.
I would move to close nominations and accept the ballot by acclamation as opposed to ballot.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for doing that. And also for the State Director Search Committee.
Okay, we have selected 2 candidates, and pending acceptance of that status, we will schedule the second round of interviews with the full commission. So that's the report.
Okay. State Director's report. Pat?
Okay. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock at Department of HHS, there'll be the first stakeholder meeting for input on BSN payment system review by consultant Mercer Healthcare. You can attend in person, or you can attend via the web, a link. If anybody needs a link, see myself or Sandra, and we can hook you up. Susan's team's wrapping up the final rule workshops. We sent out a draft template to the providers to collect their compliance responses for the January PCG review. Once all the providers meet the areas of noncompliance, then will be preliminary set for final rule, approval by the 12/31 deadline. I do want to comment that I see Ralph in the audience. Ralph came by and he actually gave it the nod of approval. And then he said something about a blind squirrel and a acorn. Come on, it's a joke. Residential observations. I talk a lot about that in the last 3 or 4 sessions, and we don't have a lot of data for a monthly report. We will maybe in 4 or 5 months, but I want to give you an update because I think it's important for the board to see this process unfolding, and really one of the biggest issues we have is safety of our consumers. And when this process gets up and running, we'll be in about 23 houses, residential settings a month. And we'll get reports on 9 outcomes, one of them safety. We're going slow so that we can build our credibility and not get ahead of ourselves and undermine our credibility in this process. But for the month of May, I hope from here on out, I'll do a monthly report. And hopefully it'll be on paper once we have enough data. But for the month of May, we were in 10 houses, and the only safety issue identified, and we interviewed every consumer and every staff. One consumer reported being intimidated by another consumer, which was addressed. I think that just, with all the data that's been flying around for the last 18 months, that's on the ground, talking to people, information as to what's the security position on the ground, and it's very compelling. And I think we have 83 to date, and they've all been in that same category. The big issue in front of us is case management market rate issue. We met at the DDSN Business Task Force. We are now entering month 3 of this issue, and I'll just refresh your recollection. Essentially, this is an issue that 3 or 4 years ago, HHS established a case management market rate, $25 for 15 minutes face-to-face, $15 for telephonic office work, case management. And the implementation was held up in 14. Now they're re-implementing it, starting at sometime this year. They've been very gracious about how and when we implement it, because we have to do some internal adjustments as far as our efficiency in billing, get waiver case management implemented. a number of things to increase our capabilities to bill so that hopefully there'll be no revenue shortfall. In March, we reported that if we took our billing rates in March, compared it with using the new 2515 rate, our revenue stream would be there about, approximately 30% of the band payment. Serious deficit reduction. In May, we measured the billing, and now it's up to 44%. So that's a 40% increase in 2 months before and after. So we're moving in the right direction. We have a lot of other things to improve that capability so that we get the revenue as high as possible. But at the same time, this whole issue of case management is very sensitive, and I want to track it every month. And because what we have a number of forces coming together. We have this rate issue. We have conflict-free case management. It's coming. Providers, rightfully so, are running businesses. They want some clarity on what is conflict-free case management because it affects their business decisions. So we're doing those at the same time. And I would say the good news of this process is there's no deadline because we all know how sensitive it is to keep a healthy case management system. But I'll keep you updated on those as we go through. And as we get closer and closer, we'll probably have longer discussions about it because we really have very little margin for error when it comes to case management, how we support them, and their role in our system. So I'll leave it at that and be glad to talk to you guys afterwards. I'm going to take a second to brag on Dexter Alston. Dexter, wave your hand back there. Does anybody know what Dexter does? He's our information security officer. Him and his team of 2 guys, and we have a very complex organization. We have a lot of data that sits outside of our fence perimeter. We're third parties, very hard to secure. And Dexter was able to, on a 4-point scale of information security, 4 being the highest, 1 being a problem. We are in the 3rd level now, and we're the first of the 74 executive branch state agencies to reach level 3. So I want to give Dexter a hand for getting us there. Because if we have a breach, guess what? We're all fired. So thank you. And lastly, I want to welcome Rufus. You've been on the job for about a month and a half, but you're finally at the table, and I appreciate it. And his energy has been very contagious. His field experience has been used by all of us, and we're really lucky to have you, and I'm glad you're up here. And I will say, now you can't complain about the problems. You're part of the problem. So he's motivated to move. And thank you for serving, really. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. All right, Rufus and Susan Beck for the Golden Palmetto Award.
This is such a prestigious award that it takes 2 of us to present it. So we're trying something new together. Today we're presenting the 2017 Golden Palmetto Award recommendations for your approval as a commission. Rufus and I were honored to serve as the review committee for this year's award. And just a little history, for more than 40 years, the Golden Palmetto has been presented to honor a county government in South Carolina that's demonstrated exemplary support for people with disabilities in the previous year. We know that the partnerships with local disability agencies and county councils is vital, and for at least 3 reasons. First, increasing and promoting many opportunities for individuals with disabilities, especially in areas of employment inclusion, which is obviously very important to our agency. Increasing visibility of people with disabilities, and then of course building those new relationships and fostering friendships. We want to, of course, credit the DDSN network of executive directors and CEOs across the state who, through their leadership, encourage those relationships at the county level and really open doors for people with disabilities. So now Rufus will present the recommendation for the award.
Thank you. We're pleased to nominate 2 counties for the 2017 Golden Palmetto Award. The 2 counties are Lexington County and Williamsburg County. And here's why. For more than 20 years, the Babcock Center has worked successfully with the Lexington County Council to foster a partnership that's resulted in more than 60 competitively paid jobs for individuals with special abilities. These individuals support and maintain sanitation sites and recycling centers. So not only is this a green initiative for Lexington County, but it provides a lot of green to several individuals with special needs in the form of competitive pay. Likewise, Williamsburg County has worked with the county government to develop opportunities for more than 12 individuals to maintain 3 county offices. They provide housekeeping and maintenance. And recently, the head of the economic development group has offered 2 employment opportunities for individuals at Williamsburg because of the success of the earlier initiative. So with your approval, we'd like to recommend Williamsburg and Lexington County for the 2017 Golden Palmetto Award.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's worth a round of applause, yeah.
And we'll need a commission to represent us in August in beautiful Hilton Head to present the Golden Palmetto Award to these 2 counties. So I know it's a luxurious resort. So whoever's interested in attending, feel free to let Pat or Susan and I know, and we'll
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
We need to make a motion.
That does,
Do we need,
motion or
do we need a
vote on that?
motion?
Yeah.
To make a motion that, we're gonna, sponsor, either Williamsburg County or Lexington County for the Golden.
Both.
Oh, no, we're giving both of them. Both
That's
of
a
them.
recommendation.
So I need a recommendation for both of them to be, to win the Golden Palmetto Award in August.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you very much. That sounds wonderful. I'm thrilled to hear about it. All right, Mrs. Joan Cooper.
Good morning.
Hey.
Okay. I'm here to present the FEMA grant award consideration. South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs has been awarded grant funds to install emergency generators at 9 special needs emergency shelter locations around the state. DDSN's grant project is a portion of the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Federal Mitigation Grant Program resulting from Hurricane Matthew. DDSN is the subrecipient of the grant award to South Carolina Emergency Management Division. And the estimated cost of the DDSN project to install emergency generators at the 9 sites is $1,400,845, and to be cost shared with a 75% match of $1,050,634 from FEMA and $350,211 in local match. The purpose of the emergency generators is to equip these emergency shelters with necessary emergency power capacity, provide shelter and safe haven for special needs individuals should power failures occur, similar to power outages experienced during winter storms, hurricanes, etc. In the event of power outages, the emergency power will be used for heating, cooling, lighting, minimal food preparation, medical equipment, and communications. By investing in essential power, emergency power, FEMA, SCEMD, and DDSN seek to mitigate the life safety issues and costs associated with hurricane dangers, winter storms, loss of power, and necessary relocation of special needs individuals. And for your information, the 9 sites are Pickens DSN, Anderson DSN, Cherokee DSN, Charles Lee Center, Lawrence, Newberry, Fairfield, Williamsburg, and the PD Center Gym.
Yes.
I just want to make a recommendation if I can.
Sure.
And part of this is the 25% match. And when they originally applied, it was to understand that the counties would pay it. On the first batch of these, the commission elected that the agency pay it. And I want to make a recommendation that the agency pay it, because this is a statewide asset. When there's a crisis, you're probably going to end up using somebody else's facility, not your own. So I think when we did an analysis of this, I want to thank Joan. It's many years of work and a lot of stopping and starting with a lot of players in the team coming down the finish line. When we complete this project and you look at a map of South Carolina, there'll be no county that's not touching a county with a FEMA generator that can drive a program or something substantive to shelter people for, the 24 hours you need for the
Right, the
major
first
crisis.
14 locations, and this is another 9,
Yes.
so a total of 23.
So
Wonderful.
So anyway, that's my thought.
So Pat, would that come from capital or where would that 25% come from?
It would come from,
We're taking care of that.
it would come from capital costs, would it not? Or would it come from operating costs? It is, we annually spend about $3 million on capital costs for the community. And this is actually a shared asset for the system. And I think it's a good investment.
So now, did these counties apply for this?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And the counties, it was put out there when the application process started that they were gonna pay for the match.
Yes.
So some of them didn't apply? I mean, has everybody applied?
Not,
No.
there were 7 counties that did not apply.
See, I'm wondering if they didn't apply because of the match.
In the last go round, which is still in an application form will be with SCMD and FEMA for a while, that they all knew that there was no match because it had already been established.
What was on the first round?
But not the second.
This is the follow-up to the first round, which was, and this is the second round.
Did we make it clear there'd be no match for this?
Yeah.
That we pay for it? Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay.
who voted to do that? Because, I mean, this presentation is its local.
Yeah, I think there's an assumption. I don't think there was a determination that the next batch would be. There's an assumption.
There was no statement in the communication with them that any batch would be required.
But here's correct me if I'm wrong, all these applications literally came in. Let me back up a step. All these applications we have exceed the amount of money we have available from FEMA. So if somebody came in today with an application, we would have no FEMA money to match with it. Is that correct? Or do we have FEMA money left?
No, and you have to apply for it for them specifically.
Okay.
So the next time we do something like that, an opportunity, if we could vote on who's gonna pay that local match first, because some people might not have applied because of the match requirement. So I just think,
So was there a vote last year on this by the commission?
There were 2 batches. The
Two
first
batches.
batch came in, this issue came up, and the expectation was the county was gonna pay for it, and then the commission said, no, we'll pay for it. And
some
then,
people didn't apply because of that match.
Right.
yeah, it was a decision.
But then
We changed
voted
it.
on it,
Yeah,
that we were
we
gonna
changed
pay
it.
the
I
match.
know we changed it for round 1,
Right.
but we're presented with another one with another 25% match. So we would have to vote for it for
That's my
DDSN
point.
Right.
to spend that on that.
Yeah, again,
Well, it's
that's,
not in the budget.
right,
It's
That's
over
right.
the spending authority.
right.
So we would
That's,
have to vote on it.
Right.
And what I'm saying is we should have taken this vote beforehand so that every county could have applied without worrying about that local match.
Yeah.
I just want to do that next time.
Okay.
But this time we are where we are, so I make a motion we approve the generator.
That's okay.
All those in favor?
Can I
Any
ask
more
one question?
discussion?
I just want one more question. I wasn't 100% clear. Is there another round of applications?
Right, we've made a third round of applications. yes.
Okay, and within that third round of applications, is there any indication with regard to local match either way?
There was no indication that they would be required to produce a 25% match.
Either way, there's nothing saying we'll pick it, but there is a 25% match
There is a
requirement.
25% match.
Okay.
FEMA won't fund but 75%.
I have
Yeah.
a follow-up motion once we voted on Vicki's motion. Madam
Mhm.
Chairman.
Okay, let's vote on the first, okay?
Yes, thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay.
As a follow-up motion to that, with regard to the upcoming grant that is currently being distributed.
Already submitted.
It's already been submitted
Already
entirely.
submitted.
So anybody who wanted to apply for it already has applied for it.
Correct.
You have another motion?
Kind of defeats the purpose of what the motion was.
Right.
Is it have the other 9, how many, okay, so we've got coverage on 20, with this, we have coverage on 20,
23.
On the upcoming one, we only applied for 4
okay,
because there are other requirements within the grant application that you be able to document your weather and your power outages.
Okay.
And only 4 of them met the criteria to make the numbers work in the cost benefit analysis.
then I withdraw. My motion is already done.
Okay. All right.
And there may be more FEMA funds to come, but South Carolina would have to have a disaster first, because the mitigation grants are based on however much they spend in the state, 10% of that goes for mitigation.
But the point is, we're trying to make the expectations of people who are bidding for this stuff readily apparent.
The commission changed.
And if somebody's in a situation where they look at it and they say, well, we can't match, we're not in a position to make that 25% grant, and they thought they might have any obligation to do so because it wasn't clear either way, and they chose not to do it, that hindered that, whatever entity that was, from doing that because they didn't have a clear understanding. And I'm just directing you because you're standing there. I don't know what I'm saying to staff, and I think
We can still have a motion if she still needs it.
No one asked us if there would be a match.
I understand nobody asked you, but you understand it's not, there's an absence of clarity. Everybody knows that the match is coming from somewhere and they just don't know. And I think we need to make sure that when these sorts of grants are done, if there's an expectation that the central office is going to pick up the cost of that, they need to know that, because that does have an impact on whether somebody's going to apply or not. So the absence of direction, okay, the absence of clarity is still an obstacle. Merely it's saying we're not, it's not enough to simply say we didn't tell them they were going to have to pay. It's important for us to say, if we're going to pay, we want you to apply, and by the way, the expectation is that we're going to pick up the bill for this. It's got to be more than just an absence of information. That sort of, and I say that to all the staff going forward. When we do this kind of thing, we need to make it clear to our provider networks what we're expecting and what we're not expecting. And that's enough said on that. I don't think
we still do a motion and say that going forward, that has to be clear. Your
do that.
motion could still.
You'd like to make that
Then it's
motion?
documented.
Sure. Then I make a motion that that in future grant proposals, regardless of the source, that the expectation of local match be made clear as to whether it is expected or is not expected in any grant.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor? I like that motion.
I like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Pat. Budget update, please.
First topic I'm talking about this morning is just quickly the upcoming fiscal year 19 budget update. Legislature is deciding the bills, and no news is good news. Right now, both houses are in favor of our $11.3 million direct care worker increase, as well as pay compression, which is the main topic. And we have every expectation that it'll be passed, and we'll know hopefully by the end of the month.
They're supposed to meet again at 10 o'clock Monday.
Okay.
Conference committee.
Great. Financial update. We have our standard chart every month, and we talk about where the budget is, and obviously our budget is in good shape. And the big issue is we are 9 days from the end of the year, and our cash position is positive. We're bouncing our checks. A month ago, we were in good shape, but we're a little closer to yellow than I want it to be. We're much greener today. I think we'll end up with a positive cash flow of cash in the bank, probably close to where we had last year, but we're all good. The big uncertainty was the last month's Medicaid revenue, and that came in higher because I would thank Lisa and Tom Ritter for stepping on the gas pedal, make sure everybody got their bills in on time and their matchable residential and day services. And the big topic we're here today for is the community provider contracts. It's going to be a joint presentation, even though I'm here. I assume Chuck. He's already failed. I told him, right behind me. Come on. Really? Really? I'm not joking.
Reserved to see.
Gosh.
Reserved.
I told him. And Lisa. So I will be up here. I will go through it. I'll do the high level stuff. I'll do what I know, and all the hard questions we'll go to those two. We have 2 new commissioners this year, as well as you just have a different voice. So what I'm gonna try to do is walk you through the contracts, put in context with our budget, and hopefully provide enough detail to make sure everybody has a good idea of what they are voting on, and ultimately, we will be recommending and requesting commission approval to approve the contracts for next year for community services. At a high level, we have three budget centers. We got the community, which we're going to talk about today. That represents 81% of our budget. Then we have regional centers. Then we have central office overhead. That's at the highest level, that's where our money goes. So today we're talking about 81% of our money being approved by the commission. Before we get going, as you wind through these documents, if you're a real policy wonk, this is important to you because it's an important reconciling item that you have to keep in mind when you look at data. And if you're not, you can disregard the next minute or two. When you look at fiscal year 18 or current year 19, and you start comparing years, this is a good way to start analyzing the budget. The two major things that happened to make sure it's reflected in there. In 18, we had $29 million in the PDD budget. We do not have it in 19. So right away, if all things were equal, we have a higher budget if PDD is still there. In the 19 budget, the budget we have here, it includes the July, August dollar increase to direct care workers. So it's about $22 million higher than 18, because 18 didn't have a dollar in the budget. So they kind of balance out. So when you're analyzing it, there's a little bit of a difference. If both of these changes went in one direction or the other, then I think we might have to do some more reporting to help you understand that. But they do tend to wash out within about $6 or $7 million. But so questions pop into your mind, you're doing some analysis, think about those two things. What I'm going to do is we have 9 pages. I'm going to walk through the first 2 pages, which are overview, and then the remaining 7 pages have to do with the details of the 8 service categories where we are spending our money on the contracts. Our total contracts, let's just start at page 1 and I'll kind of walk you through. And when I get to an end of a page or a service area, I'll stop and ask for questions. Some of these I'll comment on, some I'll comment less. But I definitely want to open up questions as we go through, as opposed to waiting at the end, because then all of a sudden it just becomes too overwhelming. Let's go to page 1. The amount of community contracts that we're requesting approval for is $543,895,841. My recommendation as we walk through this, just keep our eyes on the 8 service categories that we're talking about. If I'm myself, when I look at the finances, you can slip into, well, is this a band payment or is this a QPL fee for service? And you start getting into how it's paid, that's a separate question, and we'll be glad to answer that, but it has a convoluting effect when you start reconciling that. I will say in each of these 8 categories, you will have, some are predominantly made up of band payments with a little bit of fee for service. Some are more fee for service. That's not the issue here. It's a contract. And some contracts, like the bands, are for all 12 months. Some contracts are similar purchase orders that we have a budget that we're going to execute during the year. But at the end of the day, when we do all our math, we are budgeting $543 million. On page 1, I just want to walk down the right side of the page and just go over the increases and decreases, just to give you a ballpark. It might help answer some questions before we get started. Top right side, residential services increased 8%. That's a function of beds that were approved in prior years that are coming online, actually being funded. And a big part of it is the dollar direct care that went into effect for this year plays through the residential setting. So that's why this year's residential setting is bigger than last year, because they didn't have that dollar. So that accounts for the 8%. And it's probably more the dollar increase than the increase in beds. Case management went down 4%. That can be attributed to the PDD waiver case management. Early intervention went up 17%. And you guys can kick in, but my experience with it is the early intervention baby net is just a growing program that is just heading up at a very steep curve. So that 17% is a function of demand. And as I will, if you can hold your questions till we get to the early intervention part, I want to talk a little bit about how we're teasing out BabyNet for HHS and how we're helping them transition for the first 3 to 6 months this year. And I'll get into the dollars in a little bit. Prevention, 2% went up. That's a function of Greenwood Genetics getting a budgetary increase at the beginning of the year. Individual family support services down 16%. That's a function of two issues. One, you had most of the $29 million in the PDD waiver drew it down. And then you had I'm estimating an increase from the increase in waiver enrollees into the system for at-home services. So we went down 29 million, we went up about 10 million, and netted about 18 million. Interagency service contracts went up 24%, which is about $293,000. I think the vast majority of that is we reclassified Special Olympics from day supports to contracts. It's just a more accurate reflection of what it is. And actually, it was throwing the numbers on day supports kind of artificially high. So I felt it was more accurate to put it in this contract, in this category. Any questions on page 1? You can always go back, but I'll move on to page 2. Page 2 is basically a lot like page 1. It gives you the $543 million in the accounts. The only difference is it lists the number of individuals served. And I want to caveat that. That's the number served, and there's duplication in there. One of the reasons we're doing quarterly reports is so that we can get used to the idea that there is a recurring common understanding of the information that drives this agency. Because if you ask 5 people to do a report today, you might get 5 different numbers just based on any organization that has the same issue. And so when you look at that, $44,000 of people served, if you go to a quarterly report, we report 24,327 unduplicated consumers. So that just shows you that, a lot of these people are getting residential services, day support, case management, you probably have people getting 4 services. I just want to make sure that that number is not confused with actual consumers total. Any questions on page 2? Page 3. Page 3 is just a detail of the residential service contracts. At the top, you have I would call the subsets of the type of residential services or settings. I think that would give you, I think it's illuminating, you can see the proportionality of where our money goes. And obviously, most of it goes to CTH2s. And then below that is the actual service contract that we're requesting to be approved today when they're all combined. That gives you the actual provider and how much residential services are in its individual budget. I do want to draw your attention to one more thing before I open the questions. If you go to the bottom of page 4, I thought this was relevant information where they're breaking out the total number of consumers served and cost by private providers and public providers. And it kind of ties to what we talked about last month. Private providers are serving 16% of our people, but the cost is 20%. And that's a big jump when you look at a small number like that. And that's a function of private providers are serving our high management consumers who have a much higher rate per person. Any questions on residential? Page 5, day services. The one thing I learned at DDSN, just when you think you know it all, you run across something that you don't understand. There's a lot of nuances. There's a lot of decisions made 10 or 15 years ago that we're still working under. Basically, a level of fairness and equity. And I just want to, while I went through this, I asked Lisa to explain real quickly, just to make sure everybody's on the same page as me is. Most of these are self-evident as the type of day support, but my question was child daycare centers and HASKI community opportunities. I just want to make sure they're kind of small and unique. I want to make sure everybody understands those so that they can understand what they're approving.
Right.
The funding for the child daycare centers relates directly to a proviso in the Appropriations Act. It's 36.9, and it's for 2 child daycare centers, one in Anderson, the other in Charleston. In 2001, DDSN funded 8 of these child care centers, and also in 2008, this area was significantly impacted by the unprecedented floods. Most of the DSN boards work with families and traditional child care centers to transition these children and their families and close these programs by December 31st of 2008. The proviso was enacted to protect a minimal level of funding for the 2 remaining centers. In a subsequent budget year, which was fiscal year 13, DDSN received an additional appropriation of $100,000 specifically for the Anderson program.
And Haskell Community Opportunities?
And I've asked Susan to jump in here just in the event I missed something. The Haskell Community Opportunity programs, there are 4 programs throughout the state. We have one in Babcock, Phoenix Center, Charleston, Greenville, and Horry County. And these centers provide drop-in services for individuals served through the Head and Spinal Cord Injury Division. They have resource information, life skills training, health promotion activities, psychological, emotional support, productivity and vocational support, social and recreational activities, public awareness and injury prevention, and they also assist with connecting community and natural supports for those individuals.
Any questions on day supports?
Pat, let me ask you a question. Is there a way to add a 3rd column on pages 3 through 8 and break it out by person served? So take the total amount for each provider and then break it out based on the number of served. I'd like to see what that is, how that averages out.
Cost per.
Cost per, yeah, on that 3rd, just add a 3rd column.
I got guys that can do Excel.
All right.
You would not believe.
It just would be helpful just to be able to look at this and see, just to be able to compare.
It's.
Figure that wouldn't be hard.
It is not hard.
Yeah.
You're right.
I just figured it all out. I just did my own column right there.
Yeah.
May as well do it for you.
Any other questions? All right, let's go to 6, case management. The only thing I want to bring your eye towards is, again, down at the bottom, where we have number served is what I'm looking at. And the reason I look at that is private providers serve 24% of our consumers, and public providers boards provide 76% of our consumers. And as I see that, to me, it's a point that reminds me of as we're moving forward into conflict-free case management. Those 2 facts are very relevant because we need to know where we're going, what are the risks, what are the providers going to do? Because you may have some providers look at it may not be profitable, or and also you may have a private provider who may elect they're doing services, and so it undermines their case manager's capabilities to recruit clients. So my point is, there's a lot of change coming. 3/4 of our case providers are in boards, and when we start, and the time has not been started yet, but when we do implement conflict case management, it will just make it harder for a board case manager to develop clients. Is that fair?
Potentially.
Potentially. So it just shows you what's in front of us and some of the risk ahead of us. So that was my point. Any questions on case management? Okay, flying along here, and EI is going to be page 7 and 9. I want to EI. The reason we're asking for $29 million, we're asking for funding as if we still have BabyNet. And the reason we're asking for funding as if we have BabyNet, because HHS, which will have responsibility for BabyNet on July 1st, is not in a position to transition into a payment system. They promise us the next 3, 4, 6 months that they will transition. The arrangement that we made is that we will maintain our system, and And we will continue to do what we do. We're telling our providers to bill as they always bill. And whatever their baby net portion is, they'll reimburse us. So we'll be, it'll have a neutral effect on our budget. We're basically a third-party administrator for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. But when you look at the 29 million, I think it's important to understand this is 74% of it is baby net. So come January, February, that baby net responsibility with HHS, we will have $7 million for early intervention, 3 to 6, and we will be on a payment. And this is what the challenge ahead of us. A lot goes back to the payment system. HHS has already advised that they will be operating on fee for service. So every board, the way we fund boards is not fee for service. It's basically we fund EI physicians. We fund the physicians. They do services. They bill. We get the Medicaid in the back end. We're not going to do it. So 75% of the revenue for the board is going to be fee for service. So that leaves us with a quarter of the apple. And so we're going to have to make some determinations of how we're going to fund our portion in the next 2 or 3 months so that it's easier on everybody. We have not decided that yet, but it's just another challenge, not much different than the market-based case management rate. These things are starting to bubble up and impinge on a band system that is not designed for it. Did I miss anything on EI? That was a little complicated. Any questions?
Why, and just, if HHS is going purely to fee for services on that, why would we not piggyback and get that same?
I'm not prejudging.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm trying to figure.
It'd be hard pressed to, it's going to change the dynamics completely.
Right, and obviously that pain's going to be felt during that transition, but if we're been pushing that way, I mean, isn't baby steps?
Hey,
I'm
we want to prejudge it,
yeah.
but it's the, we got to look at it, we got to make a decision, and if it was a different type of split, like baby net was 20%, well then it'd be, maybe more, but it's going to create an issue, we're going to have to make a decision.
Okay.
And I'm with you, and certainly we'll include you as we enter up that stair-step process of what to do. Same issues with case management. At some point, that 25-15 rate is going to occur. Do we stay in bands or do we do fee for service? That will be a question down the road, but we're thinking about it. All right, I'm on my 8. Well, we have 8 service categories. We've covered 4, the 4 biggest ones. And these are 4 categories here: prevention, individual family supports, special service contracts, interagency service contracts. While we're doing, even though we're getting the contracts together, this has budget impacts. Once we commit to this, we commit to this. The first 4 categories are all direct service. I know there's an exception in there somewhere, but they're all direct service. In here, you do have contracts that are not direct service. Very relevant, very meaningful. It is just, as an organization, you always got to double check your math on indirect services as opposed to direct services. So what we did as we went through here, we did make some reductions at the margin. We, at all indirect contracts, we added language to the contracts to maximize DDSN's flexibility to adjust contracts, cancel contracts, modify contracts in the next fiscal year. So that when a new state director comes in and they look at our portfolio, he or she may have a different vision on the direction of the organization. So they will have a position to look at our indirect contracts and as they move forward. And I think for me as an interim to apply my judgment to those, I just think it's just best to provide flexibility for the next state director to engage those next year. I will recommend as interim state director that we should look at all these indirect contracts. They have meaning, they have value, but sometimes it just becomes a routine, and it's good to put everybody at the same time through the same comb to make sure that the value we are getting out of these contracts, because everything we do, we always got to remember, we got 4,000 people on the waiting list. So everything we do has a consequence. So I think that is a healthy thing to do in the beginning of the next fiscal year. I'll just go over one at a time. Any questions on it, please let me know. Any questions on prevention, which is primarily greener genetics? Individual family support services?
I have one on that.
Okay.
So there was a decrease of 16% from last year.
Mhm.
And so do we know where that reduction came from? Where did we take that out?
29 million was PDD waiver coming down, and then the increase in the waiver enrollments brought it up. So it netted out to be minus $16 million, but it's a combination of a big drop and a fairly big increase.
I'm looking at the front page here and I'm, okay, you're putting the PDD back.
Yeah, that's where most of the money is.
I got it.
That's the factor, right?
Okay.
I knew it would come up.
We're pretty much the same.
No, we're up.
We're increased our service.
Yes.
Okay,
It's just masked by the larger drop of PDD.
great, thank you.
Special service contracts? And lastly, but not least, interagency service contracts.
Pat, can you tell us, the indirect contracts you're talking about, where are of those 4 categories, where are the majority of those indirect contracts? That,
Special service contracts are all indirect,
okay,
or most of it's indirect, some of it is family support. Interagency service contracts, they're predominantly all indirect. They're not providing services. They're indirect support, valuable mission-oriented stuff. And organizations need, like when you look at our special service contracts, I mean, we're supporting volunteer organizations that attract a lot of volunteers for the fight. And we are contributing our part to it. And I think the value we get out of the contributions far exceeds our ability either to do ourselves or go it alone. And it's just the right thing to do. But again, we have to double check that to make sure we are getting that volunteerism, that we are getting that capability that we think we are. And it's just healthy to double check it every once in a while. And I think if you do it individually, it's hard to look at it. I think we do it across the board, and it should not be a difficult process, but it's a healthy thing to do. Okay, that's my presentation. I'll open up for any broad questions. And then I'll make a recommendation and
Else have any other questions?
On interagency service contract, there's an increase of 24%. Do you know where
that was Special Olympics. It was a reclassification of that expense from day programs. And that was my decision. It was skewing the numbers of people in day support. So that when we do averages like you suggest, it would ruin those averages. And so we pulled it out and put it down in the contracts where it wouldn't, I think it belongs better and it's more comparable year to year.
That's good. So no one of these.
No.
Okay.
That's I think 95%.
Perfect.
Curiosity killed the cat. I see the genetic center, autism research, we're just giving them $200,000. Are they spending more money on that? Are they spending more than the 200,000? Because
they have other funding sources, so yes, they spend additional monies.
So they are spending quite a bit more, because I mean,
that's
one of their big advertising.
They have significant expenses to stay state of the art, and we talk about them nationally, how it's very rare to have them, but they have.
That's where their money.
In my
involvement.
Yes.
Yeah, but I just was wondering, do you know how much they're spending on autism? Because they have been advertising that like crazy.
I don't have that number. I'm sure that's a question we could ask, but I've had conversations with them about the changes in autism and the effective autism state plan services.
We can get that for you. When I met with them, their research focus is autism and the reasons for autism, but the biggest part of their funding is actually providing services. But I think the research component is dedicated to autism.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
So you're not going to go into the individual?
Whatever you want. The individual detail, we provided it last year because there was a request of just to understand all the riders, the pros and cons and what goes up and what goes down. I'm not going to present on it, but I'll answer questions, or Chuck did all the detail, and Chuck will certainly have all the answers.
Okay. Well, I just have a couple. On community options, that is an increase. That looks a little higher with fewer people in it. So is there some reason, are they taking more high management people?
Go ahead, Chuck.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Community options.
Community options.
6 less people in community more.
Right.
It's not exactly 2 million, it's a little more.
Well, the dollar increase is primarily for the direct care increase, salary increase that we passed last year. So even though they may be serving less people, the dollars are going to be more.
For 19.
For 19.
But
That's true of every provider.
Right, so it's really not out of proportion to the rest?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now with Jasper and Charles Lee respite care, I think you're showing the pass-through of that respite care money.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, you're not also showing that in the provider respite care budget, are you? Like, if you looked at Jasper and you looked at what county do they provide respite for?
They provide respite for about 8 counties.
8 counties. Well, if I picked one of those 8.
And look at the band Bs or the Is would include, see the way that works is the board gets the band payment.
Yeah.
Then Jasper or Charles Lee gets the payment to provide the payroll. And then we turn around and reduce or recoup the amount from the provider that Charles Lee and Jasper pay through the respite payroll.
But you're showing that twice.
In essence, yes.
So.
Because there's contracts for both.
Well, I know, but that ups the contract amount, but you're really not, it's really one expense, one time.
Correct.
So our contract amounts are off because of that. They're not realistic, because if you can't be showing them twice.
Right, but we don't reduce the band payment by the respite payroll. We
So
pay the
you're showing it 2 different times.
Right, we are. It shows on the Jasper and the Charles Lee
I wonder
payrolls.
if there's a way for us to get away from.
There is.
Yeah.
I think there's a very good way to get rid of that, but I don't think we're ready to broach that subject yet. But I think on the at-home waivers, the band Bs and the band Is, the IDRD waiver and the community support waiver, we're handling money a lot twice in those band payments. Respite's only one example of where money's handled twice.
Yeah.
Another example would be things that are direct billed to HHS, which are included in the band payment. Then we turn around and recoup that after we get the billings from HHS. So basically, I mean, just if I were to say that to narrow down the band Bs and Is, the only things the boards are actually, or the providers are actually paying out of those 2 at-home waivers are day program costs. Everything else we handle twice here.
Well, number 1, hopefully we'll be getting rid of all the bands sooner rather than later. But number 2, when you give us contracts to approve, it would be great if we were approving that one cause one time. However it is you need to work out doing that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because we're approving it.
It is in there twice.
Yeah. And
Doesn't
so-
it pass through Jasper?
It does, but we're actually issuing 2 contracts for the full amount. So I'd have to reduce the contract to the providers by estimated respite and other credits.
Well, maybe we could just know.
I can get you, I think it nets, but I understand your question. We'll run the
For
detail.
later, you know.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see your point.
okay. That's all I have.
Anybody else have any other questions? We got a. Can we make a motion?
I make a motion, we approve the contract as presented.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. So our next regular meeting is going to be on July 19th. I hope we all survive the week. And we're going to go into executive session. Thank you very much.
Need a motion.
So I need a motion to go into
So made.
The reason.
Personnel matters. Move to executive session to discuss personnel matters. Aye.
Everybody vote.
Second.
All approved. We're going to executive session.